Okay, thank you, Bob, so much, and thank you to Ambassador Enterprises for supporting our event today. I'm not going to take up much more time because we want to bring Joyce up here, and I just want, again, to thank you for having this for us to have this opportunity. And you're correct. The information she's giving you does not happen. Not many people are willing to share that, so it's such a great resource. We're really excited today, and I will actually be walking around, so it's kind of a workshop stuff going on, and so Joyce is going to have some things for us to be doing, and so I have a microphone, so if you have a question or comments, please look for me, or if you need any assistance in this, we will be floating around to assist her workshop today. So without further ado, Joyce Marter, guys, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here today. And for those of you, how many of you are new and were not here yesterday? Okay, so a fair amount of you. So I'm Joyce Marter, and I've been a licensed psychotherapist for almost 25 years. I can't believe it. I'm a national public speaker. I'm adjunct faculty at Northwestern University. I started a private practice in the Chicago area called Urban Balance, and it grew tremendously, and today it has over 170 therapists working from 17 locations in 6 states. I did sell Urban Balance a few years ago to Refresh Mental Health, which is a national mental health organization, and I am an impassioned mental health advocate. And I thank each and every one of you for being here today, really, truly. Thank you for coming here. Thank you to the sponsors. Thank you to Mental Health America. I have found my work as a psychotherapist to be emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually rewarding. And I'm so happy to be here at Fort Wayne. What a lovely community. I have had such a warm welcome and the pleasure of meeting so many of you, and what brings me the most joy is hearing back from you the impact of my presentations. And since yesterday, I had several people share with me how my talk impacted them, not only in terms of what they're going to bring back to their organizations to promote mental health awareness, but to touch them personally, how the talk touched each of you personally. And so I really want that to be the message today as well. As we move through this material, be thinking about your organizations and how you can be a lighthouse for promoting positive mental health and support and resources, but also think about this for your own personal self-care and wellness. And as Jessica mentioned, I have a landing page. If you weren't here yesterday, it is available on this QR code. So just like when you're in a restaurant, you can go ahead and hold up your camera and focus it on the QR code, and it's going to bring you to a landing page on my website. Audrey from Mental Health America will also email you that landing page, and I will show you this QR code again at the end of the presentation, but it has copies of my slides from today and yesterday, and it has digital copies of all of the handouts from today. So don't feel like you don't want to write on your handouts today because they are for you, and you can still have fresh, clean copies that you can print out and share with your organizations through this landing page. Also, my husband Jason is videoing, and we will have these videos of these presentations. So if you were not able to attend yesterday, the video will be made available to you through Mental Health America. And if one of your colleagues wasn't able to come today, this will be recorded as well. So as Jessica mentioned, today we're going to kind of follow up on what we talked about yesterday, but it's also going to be a little bit more of a deeper dive, and I want to hear from you. So I want you to ask questions, to make comments. You're going to have some worksheets. You're going to talk to each other. I know when I'm a participant in these kinds of things, I'm always like, oh, do I have to do this stuff? But I promise you, you will find value in this, and you will make friends at your tables. So thank you ahead of time for your participation with that. So yesterday, we talked a lot about mental health awareness. No shame, no stigma. We all have mental health issues just like we have physical health issues. I shared that when I was in graduate school, I was really afraid my professors were going to see that I deal with an anxiety disorder, which I still deal with and manage, and that they would tell me, you can't be a therapist, you've got your own issues. Well, guess what? We all have mental health issues because we're human. And so we want to promote access to care. We want people to know that it's normal and healthy and proactive to talk to a counselor or therapist. And not only does it help us get out of crisis or struggling, when we work on promoting our positive mental health, we promote our emotional intelligence, we increase our confidence, we do better at work and at home and in our relationships, or if you're parents, or it helps us in all our personal aspects of life. So today we're going to talk about mental health first aid. So many of you are leaders or supervisors or HR representatives of your organizations. And so we're going to explain what mental health first aid is and give you kind of a basic overview of that. The handouts that were out front, hopefully you have 3 sets of handouts. If you don't worry about it. Audrey's going to help make sure that everybody has those 3 handouts that we're going to do later. And these are practical tools. They're actually from my new book that came out last week called The Financial Mindset Fix. And it's a mental fitness program for an abundant life, which is a holistically successful life that's filled with mental well-being, connected relationships, work-life balance, which we talked about yesterday is so important because so many people are dealing with burnout now, and also financial health and prosperity, because right now we're dealing with a mental health and financial health crisis. So these tools you can use for yourself and you can share at your workplaces. We're also going to talk about mindfulness. Yesterday I touched on that, but I'm going to explain a little bit more what mindfulness is and how you can incorporate it into your workplace and how that's helpful for mental health. And I'm going to share a bunch more resources with you. And again, I cannot stress enough how impressed I am with Mental Health America, and the Northeast Indiana chapter is amazing. They have tons of training and resources available to each and every one of you. And Mental Health America National, their website is also amazing with just tons of information that can support you and your organizations. So definitely check that out. So we talked yesterday about the importance of addressing behavioral health care in the workplace. And most of you probably know that behavioral health care incorporates both mental health and substance abuse and addiction. And they really go hand in hand. They're very interrelated, as we talked about yesterday. Not addressing mental health in the workplace causes low productivity, low morale, because people are suffering and nobody's talking about it, absenteeism, turnover, accidents and injury, because if people are impaired, they're going to make mistakes and get hurt, and healthcare costs. Because when we don't take care of our mental health, it actually impacts our physical health. There's a huge mind-body connection, and so if we are dealing with anxiety or depression or trauma, feelings are like waves of energy that we store in the body. And if we're not dealing with them and we're holding them in our body, it can cause sickness and illness. So this is why it's so important, and I thank you, again, each and every one of you for being here today. So what is your responsibility as a leader within your organization? How do you promote mental health in the workplace? Something that's really important right now, we talked yesterday about the horrifying statistics of nearly 1 million people die a year because of overwork, and these are people working 55 hours a week or more. So I want you to think about your organization and what is the work-life balance within your organization. As I mentioned yesterday, I've been speaking with companies across the nation, some of them global, And work-life balance is a big problem right now, especially with the pandemic, because many people are working from home and they're actually working more. And there's less separation between work life and personal life. And so that makes each of us responsible for creating structure in our days so that we're taking good care of ourselves. And apparently, we're all not super great at that. So some of the resources that I share today are tools to help you and your staff promote that work-life balance. You want to set realistic performance expectations. I mentioned yesterday, one of the companies that hired me to speak said they expected their employees to work 80 to 100 hours a week. Very unhealthy expectations. I once had a student intern. I loved this experience for me as an employer. She was meeting with me and I gave her several tasks for her to help me with. And she said, "Thank you, Joyce. I just wanted to let you know that I have 10 hours this week and you just gave me 30 hours of work. Which of these tasks would you like me to prioritize so I can make sure to get those done for you?" And she said it super politely and very diplomatically, and I was so grateful that she said that. I didn't realize I'd asked her to do 30 hours of work in 10 hours. I didn't realize it would take that long. And she could have done that and then secretly hated me, right? And I think a lot of us do that. And we harbor resentment because we're overworked, and we need to learn how to communicate assertively, which demonstrates respect for ourselves and others, and set healthy limits and boundaries. And we can do that in a way that's respectful and honest and collaborative, but we have to have those conversations. And we talked yesterday about psychological safety in the workplace, that you as supervisors need to make your staff feel safe and comfortable that they could actually say that to you without fear that they're going to have retaliation or lose their jobs. Some of you are HR. If you are HR, you are at the helm of promoting mental health and wellness and work-life balance in your organization. Some of you are not in an HR role, but you will want to collaborate with the HR representative of your organization. They will be your partner in promoting mental wellness in your organization. Part of your responsibility is to promote a collaborative team environment. This has been challenging during the pandemic, right? Because many of us have been working from home. It can be really difficult to maintain that kind of community connection. And so I've heard of organizations who are working mostly remotely do really fun, silly things like Salesforce. I have a client that worked there, and she was explaining that they have Deepak Chopra himself come and give guided meditations for the staff. Or they, in the middle of a Zoom meeting, had a plank contest, and whoever won the plank contest got a small prize. Or they had a meeting where everyone wore a costume. So silly things, but ways to foster community and connection within your organization are important. And we talked yesterday about the importance of mental health in the workplace and having these honest conversations. One company that I mentioned yesterday that had several suicides within their organization, their CEO kicked off their mental health series by sharing his own mental health story. Extremely successful man, head of a global company, and probably most people would not imagine that he had dealt with depression. And by him sharing that, it's normalizing, it's validating, and it helps other people feel safe and comfortable to say, yeah, you know what, I've struggled too. I've been there. And so that's what we want you to do. We want you to have honest conversations about mental health and work-life balance in the workplace. And I'm asking you to learn mental health first aid. So we're gonna start off with that. What the heck is mental health first aid? It's learning how to help people within your organization who are dealing with a mental health issue. Do you have to be a licensed therapist or counselor like myself? No. All you have to be is yourself and your own compassionate, lovely, conscious, kind self. That's all you have to do, and I'm just encouraging you to say something. That's the big takeaway from today. Say something. We have been socialized that it's impolite to comment on somebody who's struggling. And so oftentimes we kind of turn our head away and pretend that we don't notice that somebody is behaving differently. Or we might vent about them like, gosh, they're super crabby and irritable. What's their problem? And I'm asking you to respond differently, to respond with compassion and care and have these conversations. You are, part of mental health aid, first aid, is being the bridge to care. So you do not need to be the counselor or therapist, but you are going to be the bridge to get people there. So you're going to know the support resources that are available in your organization if you have an EAP, what your insurance benefits are, what's available through Mental Health America. And this is not a substitute for somebody having personal treatment. We do not need you to be trying to be a therapist with your supervisees. That's not appropriate, it's not your responsibility, and they need to be connected with a professional. As we talked about yesterday, mental health issues are very common. With the pandemic, 65% of adults are reporting symptoms of anxiety. 45% are reporting symptoms of depression. Most of us are dealing with clinical burnout, feelings of overwhelm and exhaustion because we've had so much constant change and uncertainty. And we need to remove the stigma of mental health issues. There is sometimes a barrier to care, and so we need to recognize that we need to help people transcend those barriers to care. And those barriers to care can be cost, it can be time, it can be stigma, and so we need to help people move through the stigma and get connected with resources. Oftentimes, people with mental health issues do not seek help on their own. And so we need somebody else to say something. I myself am a mental health professional. I'm trained in this. I talk about this all the time. When I lost my mother over 10 years ago, my best friend, who's a therapist, said to me, she said, Joyce, I think maybe you might need medication. And I was defensive with her. And I said, what do you mean? I was dealing with complicated grief because my mother died very suddenly. And I was experiencing what really looks like a depressive episode. And I was having difficulty working, and my kids were very small. It was a very, very difficult time. And I was so glad that she said something because I couldn't see myself. I was in it. And so we need to have those conversations with our loved ones. No shame, no stigma. People don't argue with their cardiologist about taking heart medications. They don't argue about taking insulin for diabetes. Our brains are hardwired from genetic predisposition to respond to stress with depression or anxiety. It is a biomedical condition. It is not a weakness. It is not our fault. It is a normal response to our life experiences. Some people get really uncomfortable talking about mental health issues, and that's okay. That's normal. So you can recognize within yourself what you're capable of and what you're not, and maybe you notice something in someone and you need a helper. That's absolutely fine. Seek support, ask HR, ask another colleague to help you have this conversation with someone. So these are some of the symptoms or mental health issues that you may see in the workplace. And the anger management or aggressive behavior is something that I hear a lot about from supervisors, or people who are underperforming or calling in sick a lot and you don't really know what's going on, or they have erratic behavior. I mentioned yesterday that I have a list of the common signs and symptoms of mental health conditions on my landing page, so be sure to look at those if you were not here yesterday. So these are the issues that we want to help you learn how to address. So we're going to help you learn how to assess for suicide. I have another slide here, but the key is to listen non-judgmentally. So sometimes when we listen to people, we're like, gosh, I wouldn't feel that way. You know, if my boss gave me a bad review, I'd just know I needed to work harder. We can't compare ourselves to others. People's feelings are a normal response to their life experiences and their biochemistry. And so even if somebody is responding differently than you would, we need for you to have compassion and empathy and put yourself in their shoes and imagine how they feel and be able to reflect to them, you know, I understand that you're upset. I understand that you're angry. I understand that you're sad. That's completely understandable. That's a normal response to what you're going through. Empathy is the magic wand in relationships. We all desire to be heard and known and understood. And if we do not experience empathy in relationships, we don't feel as connected to the other person, and it can lead to misunderstanding and relationship conflict. I learned recently that there are 3 kinds of empathy. Cognitive empathy, where we can say, okay, mentally, I get it, you're mad. Emotional empathy is when we actually feel with the other person. And that's when somebody is crying and you find yourself tearing up as well. That is a deeper level of empathy. And transformative empathy is when you feel with them and you feel moved to help. And that's what I'm asking of you. That deeper empathy and compassion where you are not listening with judgment, you are listening with your heart and your soul, and you want to be of service and to help other people get the help that they need and deserve. You're going to give reassurance that you are a support, that you're there, that you care, and you're going to give information and resources. So just being a kind human being. Maybe think of somebody in your life who one time you were going through a difficult time, and they were there for you, and what that felt like for you, what that meant to you. And you're going to encourage some self-help and support strategies. And maybe some of them are some of the resources that I share in the exercises that we're doing later. Right now, suicide rates are at a 30-year all-time high. They are the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. And I mentioned that 16% of suicides are financially driven. So with the unemployment rates and businesses closing, people are feeling financial distress. So everyone has been under stress for 1.5 years now, and we need to be aware of this and know that this happens. And right now, the research is showing that our young adult population is at the highest risk right now, so ages 18 to 24. So thinking about your friends, your family, your children, your grandchildren, your loved ones, your neighbors, keep this in mind. These are some of the warning signs of suicide. I'm speaking in a couple weeks for a friend of mine who runs a foundation because her brother suicided. So she has a charity that she gives, and this is kind of a little tangent story. I recommended that she talked to my speaking coach because she wanted to get more practice speaking for her foundation. And my speaking coach met with her and she said, wow, what an amazing woman. And a week later, my speaking coach's uncle died by suicide. And she was so happy to have met Amy, who understood what that was like. And she said, had she not met Amy the week before and had some conversations about her foundation, she would not have known how to respond to her mother and how to give her mother support during this very difficult time. So sometimes people experience shame and a range of emotions when they've lost a loved one to suicide. Maybe they feel anger, confusion, hurt. Sometimes they might not even be honest about the cause of death. And we each need to be aware of these warning signs and err on the side of caution. If you notice these in someone, don't sweep it under the rug. Say something. Say, when I was a new therapist, I found it really awkward to ask people. We're required to say, have you had thoughts about wanting to hurt yourself? And it felt almost like I was implying they were crazy. It's what we have to ask. Just simply, matter-of-factly, have you thought about harming yourself? Have you thought of hurting yourself? Do you have a plan? These are questions that we have to ask, and people who are thinking about that really do want you to ask. They often will then share. I'm surprised by how many people then say, yes, I have had thoughts of suicide. And maybe even most of us here have had a moment where we're like, I just don't want to be here anymore. And so that's part of the human experience. And there's kind of a continuum of those kind of passive suicidal thoughts to actually having a plan and an intent and a desire to carry that through. So if you have a concern about a colleague or a coworker or a supervisee, or maybe it's even your boss. I actually did an alcohol intervention on my mentor and supervisor. I noticed that he started smelling of alcohol. He was leaving me slurry messages in the evening. So I got together with one of his other supervisees and we did an intervention. Boy, was he mad. He was really quite upset with us, but he trained us well. And he got into treatment and started going to AA, and he's doing a lot better. So we need to care enough to have these difficult conversations. So if time permits, consult with someone, consult with HR, consult with Mental Health America, and ask, how should I approach this? Before speaking with someone about a mental health issue, calm yourself, get grounded, take some deep breaths. It's kind of like being a good parent. When I'm in session with a client and they report suicidal ideation, I say, I care too much about you to not let you be okay. And so I'm going to help you through this, and this is what needs to happen. We need to get you to the hospital. We're going to have an assessment. You're going to get some help. You're going to be safe. They're going to give you counseling, and I'm going to be with you until when you get out, and I support them every step of the way. I contact family members so that I'm not the only person who knows, and help them have support and in their family to help them be well. If you're having a conversation about somebody's mental health, don't be looking at your phone or your computer and saying, are you okay? You turn to them, you're present, you're compassionate, you're open, you're attuned to them. Your tone of voice is calm and caring, and you're expressing concern in a loving way, not a judgy way, not an angry way. You want to talk to people in a confidential place. So if you're in the middle of a group meeting, is that the appropriate time to talk to somebody about if they're dealing with depression? No. You want to say, hey, Bob, I'm wondering if we could have a couple minutes. I'd like you to step into my office. I just want to check in, see how you're doing. I'm going to share with you some videos later. I'm not going to play them in the interest of time, but there are a couple videos that are brilliant examples of a supervisor having a conversation about mental health with a supervisee. And I really encourage you to take a look at those. Approaching them is the most important thing, and that's what I want you all to have confidence in doing. I know it may feel uncomfortable, but I want you to approach people and say something. So just say what you're noticing. And those of you in HR know that in supervisors, make it factual, objective, and clear. So not judgmental, but hey, I noticed that you've been calling in sick lately. Your work performance is not what it usually is. I noticed that you're not really talking with people in the office. You seem more quiet than usual. Is everything okay? How are you? How are things at home? What can I do to be a support to you? How are you feeling about your job? And ask these questions and listen. Ask open-ended questions. That's when people talk. And then listen with empathy. Listen to the feelings. So listening with empathy means you're not listening with your mind and just reporting what you're hearing, but you're listening with your heart and you're acknowledging what the other person is feeling. And people may have tears, they may cry, they may share personal information with you. Sometimes that's uncomfortable for people if you're not used to that, but that is normal. That's what happens, and that's a positive thing. That means that they're opening up and they're sharing with you. And then you just want to tell them, I'm here for you, the company is here for you, we have these benefits in place, we'll work with you. I had a client who was hit by a car when she was crossing a crosswalk, and the trauma of that incident, interestingly, as I explained yesterday, trauma is connected to our old traumas, brought up physical abuse from her childhood. And she was unable to work. She was not sleeping, she was having nightmares, she was experiencing depression, and her job, which is a major company, Fortune 100 company, helped her take intermittent FMLA so that she could have counseling and treatment and work on days that she felt good and take care of herself on days that she wasn't. They helped her change her job from a really high-pressure customer service job to more of a data entry job temporarily, and she got well. Within 6 or 8 weeks, she was back at work and feeling much, much better. And so that's what we're wanting you to do, to be there to keep your staff working in your organizations and help them heal and move through mental health issues. If you want to know how to make a referral to counseling, I did a TV segment that's on a video there that you can watch where you can see how I recommend that you talk to someone. And I also wrote an article, I think that was in the Huffington Post, on how to recommend counseling to someone. I always say to people like, hey, I've been in counseling. I think it's healthy and normal. It's like seeing a personal trainer for your mind and your relationships. It doesn't mean you're crazy. It doesn't mean you're in crisis. It's like going to the dentist or the doctor, and help is effective. And it's affordable. Mental health parity law makes mental health services covered the same as major medical. And most of you have EAP benefits, so there's free confidential counseling services available to your employees and their family members. So again, really paying attention to your language instead of saying, like, what's wrong with you? I know none of you would ever say that. Like, what the heck's going on? Instead of saying that, saying, how are you? How are you feeling? Aren't you surprised how does it make you feel when somebody says to you, you shouldn't feel that way? You shouldn't be mad. Don't be mad. It's like adding gasoline to the fire, right? So you want to validate. These are some assessment questions if you are concerned that somebody is thinking about suicide. These are some words. So if you're having difficulty finding the words, these are the words that you can ask. If somebody has had a suicide attempt in the past, that puts them at higher risk. If they are somebody who uses drugs or alcohol, that puts them at higher risk because their judgment might be impaired. Have they collected items that they would need to carry out a plan? So sometimes people have bought a bunch of sleeping pills, or they've stacked up some medications, or they have a gun in the home. This is information that makes them higher risk. So we need to ask these questions. How to help? Let the person know that you're concerned, you care, you're willing to help. Express empathy. I know some of this is redundant, but you want to get the person talking. You want to get them to open up and share. And sometimes the best way to do that is to sit with them in silence. It's really uncomfortable to sit with someone in silence, but it can be very intimate, and it can be what they need to open up. And as counselors, we sometimes have to do that. We have to tolerate the quiet instead of filling the space with talking. So you can also normalize that, oftentimes people have thoughts of suicide. We just want to make sure that they're going to be safe. We want to help them get help. So the more that we can normalize that, instead of being afraid of them or making judgy faces, we want to keep our facial expressions compassionate. So these are the steps. Act swiftly, don't delay, don't minimize, don't go into denial. Express care and concern. Focus on the specific behaviors. You do not need to diagnose, nor should you. So you wouldn't want to say to an employee, I think you're depressed. I think that maybe you have ADD or something. That's not your job. You can just say, I'm noticing some stuff. I think maybe talking to a counselor would be helpful. If you have an EAP, which how many of your organizations have an employee assistance program? I think most of you do. And maybe some of you who didn't raise your hands, maybe your organizations do and you don't even know it. So that's a step, is to ask, do you have an employee assistance program? The EAP will help you. I think I'm going to flip here. This is a slide from one of the companies that I spoke for recently during the pandemic, that everyone's working virtually. And so some of the supervisors are having these mental health assessment calls over Teams or over Zoom or over whatever platform you use. And so they actually showed here how to contact the EAP and have the EAP counselor join their conversation. So the EAPs are 24/7. They have a 1-800 number, and they are staffed by licensed counselors. So you can contact the EAP if you've got someone in your office, or if you are even on Zoom or a video platform, you can add them in. So you want to have your EAP's information available. I worked as an EAP counselor for 5 years. It was really interesting and rewarding work. So we get these calls, and we do an assessment over the phone, and we determine the appropriate level of care. Does this person need to go to the hospital? Does this person need to go to day treatment or intensive outpatient treatment? Or do they just need to see a counselor or therapist? And is it something urgent? Do they need to do this today or this week? Or is it something less urgent? You don't need to figure that out. You're not trained to figure that out. So you want to get your people over to your EAP. And if you don't have an EAP, I really encourage that you look at the presentation from yesterday and look into having that benefit available for your employees. So again, some different resources there. Nowadays, therapy is over telehealth. All insurance companies are paying for that now. It's mandated, and it's covered by insurance. So it's very easy for people. And some people who are living at home and working from home and who have kids and family, they have their sessions in their car. I had a session yesterday with a mom that all her sessions, she's in a car, and she's always in a different parking lot. She's like, today I'm at the Presbyterian Church. So you can still have private therapy sessions even if you don't have privacy in your home. If you are concerned of imminent risk, they've said, I'm thinking about hurting myself or someone else, you err on the side of caution, call 911. Maybe they're at their house. You can always send a wellness check. You can send an officer to their home for a wellness check. So again, just erring on the side of caution. And as a counselor, I have to honor confidentiality, except when somebody expresses thoughts of wanting to hurt themselves or somebody else, or in cases of abuse or neglect. I'm sure many of you in your roles have similar responsibilities, but it's better to err on the side of caution. So now I'd like for you in your tables to have a little conversation. This is a case example that I mentioned yesterday, and I'm actually not going to use this one because I did mention it yesterday. I'm going to use a little bit more of an ambiguous one that a workplace that I presented for a couple of weeks ago gave to me. One of the supervisees said that he had an employee who is an older woman, and he said that he felt that her aging was causing a decline in her job performance, that she was seeming to struggle with the technology and her performance was going down. So this is a little bit of a different conversation, but I'd like you to talk with your team. All right, if we could come back to the group now. And I'd like to hear from a representative from your table to share what some of your thoughts were, how you might deal with either of these situations. So if you are willing to speak for your group, if you'd raise your hand and Jessica will come over, that would be great. I think Bob raised it. Oh, there's a hand over there. Good.
Hi. Okay, so the first thing we talked about is that we didn't want to do that one.
Good.
But we did. We
Yes.
did anyway. I think the way that we would approach it, or how we spoke about approaching it, is not addressing that this may be an age-related thing, because the person could be tired, overwhelmed. There could be circumstances in their home that have changed. Their husband or spouse or significant other could have Alzheimer's or dementia or medical issues. An adult child could have moved back home because their marriage failed. There could be other things going on in that person's life, and I wouldn't make it just age-related or age-based. And then I would encourage that person to not focus on the age part of it, but maybe start a conversation with them saying, oh my gosh, I've been so overwhelmed lately. I can't keep up. How are you feeling? And
I love
encourage
that.
some conversation instead of making accusations that they're not keeping up.
Yes.
So that's
Beautiful. And I loved that you said, I'm feeling overwhelmed lately. How are you doing? That really removes any judgment. Other thoughts?
I just want to add something to that. On the flip side, I would want to also have a conversation with the administrator who came to me and said, well, it's an aging issue.
Yes.
Because that was a judgment call, and I think that, that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. Good job. Fantastic. Anybody else want to share what your group talked about? I'd like to hear from at least a couple others.
Well, one of the things I also brought up is if they've been performing and now you're seeing the decline, a lot of times with our older team members, they may have changed a medication, or there may be something going on there that if you have that relationship with them to have that conversation, it may be a simple fix of just reaching out to their doctor because they're not seeing it and having that type of conversation.
Excellent point. So it could be, like they said, a family issue, a relationship issue. It could be a health issue. Excellent point. And Bob?
You know, we talked about Caitlin. We went back to the maternity leave. But the first thing we said is we want to just show that we care about her. And so, you know, instead of, you know, the confrontation, it's just acknowledging you've got a lot going on in your life. And
Super
just,
normalizing.
Just to get her talking and then, you know, let it unpack from there.
Beautiful.
But empathy, I guess, is what we keep coming back to, right?
Yes, absolutely. Other thoughts or things that you discussed that you thought were interesting or important? One more person?
Where are we going here? Yes.
Just wanted to say that something else we discussed is that we could also encourage that person to make use of their health insurance benefits, make sure they've had, a well person check or, with their doctor or a doctor visit. Hey, are you taking advantage of your benefits? Have you seen your doctor recently? And, make sure you do that for yourself. We all have to stay healthy and encourage a person to do that. That's another
Beautiful.
way of approaching it that they came up with, so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, great. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about mindfulness, and then we're going to dive into these wheel exercises, and that's my favorite part. So also wanted to mention that your EAPs offer these types of benefits as well. So making sure that you're utilizing those, and Mental Health America sounds like they have other presentations and things that they're available for as well. Sometimes people don't know the differences between these types of mental health providers, and here's a brief explanation of each in case you're interested in learning more about that, but again, your EAP can determine the appropriate level of care. So also asking you to take care of your own mental health as leaders. So I love this quote from Maya Angelou. She said, if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. So doesn't that fit with the pandemic? Because there's a ton probably that we don't like, and we can't control that. But we can control how we respond. I'm sorry that the font is small on this. What we can control is our own thoughts, our own emotions, our own choices, and our own behaviors. We cannot control other people's thoughts, emotions, choices, or behaviors. We can't control the pandemic. We can't control the government. We can't control our bosses or our organizations in many ways. So as a therapist, I have a lot of people sit in my office and they spend a lot of time talking about other people. I've done it myself. We need to focus on what we can control so that we can feel better. So we're talking about prioritizing your own mental health and well-being and encouraging that in your staff and creating structure to your day. The research shows that the morning is the most important time of the day. And if you are reaching for your phone first thing in the morning and checking emails, that is really not healthy for you. It's best if you take some time for some breathing, some journaling, maybe meditation or prayer, or stretching or yoga, or just having your coffee and sitting outside. Some sort of wellness routine each morning is going to set you up for success. Taking a break from the news. The news is traumatizing. So I recommend listening to it maybe first thing in the morning and maybe at the end of your workday, but not too close to bedtime. And not having it on 24/7 in the background while you're working. It's so traumatizing and triggering. And to take time for mindfulness. So mindfulness has been around for thousands of years. And it is a practice where you focus on the present moment. So many of us spend a lot of time ruminating about the past, or now maybe we're worrying about the uncertainty of the future. And peace can be found in the present moment. And across thousands of cultures and thousands of years, the breath is believed to tie together the mind, the body, and the spirit. So one of the easiest ways to practice mindfulness is to connect with your breath. And I know it sounds very simple, but there's a lot of science behind this, that when we slow and deepen our breathing, we calm our minds and we relax our bodies. And we become more responsive instead of reactive. We can learn to observe and notice our thoughts instead of having our mind chatter kind of control us and overwhelm us. Another way that you can practice mindfulness that's very simple is to simply connect with your senses and notice, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you smelling? What are you tasting? What are you touching? Connecting with your senses brings you out of your head and into your body, and it makes you more conscious. And mindfulness practices really can be practiced anywhere, anytime. So you don't have to be sitting on a yoga mat, meditating. You can be doing dishes. You can be vacuum cleaning. You can be going for a walk outside. And instead of thinking about your to-do list, notice the clouds, notice the trees, notice how your feet feel on the ground. That is mindfulness. And it calms, it reboots your system. It regulates your nervous system and calms you down. These are the research benefits of mindfulness. And I think it's so interesting that they basically counter all the symptoms that we talked about that were symptoms that people are experiencing during the stress of the pandemic. So it boosts our immune system, boosts mood and empathy, improves memory and cognitive functioning, enhances relationship, decreases depression, anxiety, and stress, increases emotional intelligence. So this is maybe kind of a weird thing to say. Well, in my therapy sessions, I use mindfulness. I focus on my breath, and I notice what I'm feeling in my body when I'm sitting with a client. And I notice the feelings that I have, like if I'm feeling bored or I'm feeling annoyed. I pay attention to that, and usually it has something to do with the client's experience. And when I share aspects of what I'm noticing, like if I'm feeling angry, I'll say, do you feel angry about that? Or how, something along those lines. And my clients have asked me, are you psychic? How'd you know that? And we have that deeper intuition available to us in our bodies when we connect with ourselves on a deeper level, and it's a practice. When I sold my business several years ago, I had 50 prospective buyers and 8 offers. And I practiced mindfulness to choose my buyer. So I sat there and paid attention to how I felt in my body as I was with this person. And I had one gentleman that I was with, and I took notes. He thought I was probably taking notes about what he was telling me, but I was saying, I feel uncomfortable. I don't believe what he's saying. I was paying attention to how I was feeling. I did not choose that buyer, even though he offered the best price. I wanted somebody who I trusted. I wasn't going to hand my organization over to somebody who I didn't trust or who I didn't feel had good intentions. So that can improve your emotional intelligence. It can also improve your financial well-being. So in my book, I talk about applying mindfulness to finance so that we can be conscious financially. So these are different ways that you can practice mindfulness. The simplest is breath work. There's tons of YouTube exercises on breath work if you look it up. In yoga, they call it pranayama. You can connect with nature. You can meditate. How many of you meditate? There are a lot of you that did not raise your hands, and I encourage you to give it a try. Apps like Calm and Headspace have free 30-day trials, and meditation is like a reboot for the mind, the body, and the spirit. Just like computers, our brains get overwhelmed and start to glitch. Meditation resets our systems so that we feel better and we're functioning better. So many of us suffer from the disease of being busy, and so we need to practice mindfulness in the workplace. And these are some ways that you can do that. In therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy is one of the most supported forms of therapy empirically, and the belief is that our thoughts precede our emotions and behaviors. So we need to pay attention to our self-talk. So you might notice now people who have catastrophic fears or catastrophic thinking about the pandemic are feeling more anxiety and overwhelm. So we need to coach ourselves to keep our thinking positive. I always talk about naming your inner critic. So we all have an inner critic, that voice in our head that puts us down. I call mine Zelda. She's a total pain. And that voice comes from maybe our parents or past relationships, past life experiences, and we often speak to ourselves as we would nobody else. And I was once telling this to a journalist for Bustle, and she said, that sounds really weird to name your inner saboteur, but I think it sounds interesting. I'm going to give it a try. So she wrote an article a couple weeks later saying, I named my negative thinking Terry for a week, and I felt better. And she actually brought it to her therapist. She had notes where she said that she was in the grocery store, and all of a sudden Terry popped up and started telling her she was a loser and a freak in her dating life and comparing her to other women. So do you do these things to yourself? Do you put yourself down? We need to become mindful of that. So name your inner critic and turn down the volume. Detach from that negative voice. Replace that with more positive and compassionate self-talk. One of the easiest ways to shift from negative thinking to positive thinking is to practice gratitude. In my organization, when morale was low, I started having people say something that they were grateful for about our workplace at the end of the meeting or the beginning of the meeting, and it really shifted the attitude around. A lot of us can spend time worrying about things now, and before I go to sleep, I think through, what is it that I'm grateful for? So I'm going to move through these kind of quickly because I do want to get to the handouts. So detachment is a mindfulness ability to separate from negative emotions. Once I was at Target, and the woman in front of me was screaming at the cashier. And she was even swearing at him. And he remained completely calm and professional. And I was like, how the heck is he doing that? And so when it got to be my turn, I said to him, I'm so sorry that woman was so rude to you. And like, how the heck did you do that? You were so calm and professional. And he said, oh, I don't let anyone in my head who isn't paying rent. That's detachment. It's the ability to separate yourself. It doesn't mean you don't care or you're not empathically connected. You're just observing them without absorbing it. So, call to action for your self-care. So, raise your hand if you do not have a self-love wheel. So, in your handouts. If anybody doesn't, then I think Audrey's going to help you. And so this is one of the exercises from my book, and this is something that I want you to take a moment to complete now, and I'll explain how it works. Each spoke on this wheel is a different aspect of self-love. And I apologize that there's a little mistake on your handout and on this wheel where it says connection to community. It should actually be sleep. But you can either add sleep to it or whatever as you move through it. But the way that it works is you're going to rate how well you're doing on each spoke by putting a little dot on the spoke. If you're doing really well in that area, your dot would go toward the outside of the wheel. And in a perfect world, we'd all have a nice, big, round self-love wheel. But because we're human, we have dents in our wheel. So we might have areas that we're not doing super great. I'm often not great about drinking water. Maybe your sleep hasn't been great lately. So once you've gone around all the spokes, you're going to connect your dots, and you're going to see where you have dents in the wheel. So I'd like you to take a few moments to complete this, and then when you're finished, you're going to talk about it at your tables with your group. And let us know if you have any questions. All right, let's come back to the group. Anybody willing to share what you noticed or what you talked about at your table? And Jessica will come over. Maybe someone we haven't heard from. I see a hand over here.
This table?
Back in the corner over there.
Oh my goodness, I'm all over the place.
Thank you, Jessica. You're getting your steps in.
I am, thank you.
So I am all over the place too on this chart. And what this tells me is that I have to reprioritize things. My priorities are not where they should be. So,
Are you going to prioritize yourself?
yes.
Yay! And when you do
Yes.
that, then you're going to be more service to the people that you love.
Yes.
And to your workplace.
Absolutely. I think that's what we all put everybody else ahead of ourselves. It's like, I got to get this, and this done. And then at the end of the day, it's whatever time is left, that's what we get.
Exactly.
So.
I went through that and then I experienced burnout, and that's what led me to mindfulness and self-care, which has helped tremendously. Other things people noticed. Did anyone have a perfect wheel? I heard someone say this is embarrassing. Did anyone find theirs kind of sobering? Did you learn something about yourself that was unexpected?
We have someone here.
Great.
Self-care was extremely high, but never perfect, no matter how hard we try. Sleep and trying to keep the house organized, always a challenge.
Absolutely. And part of self-care sometimes is letting our house not be perfect. That's okay too. Well, good. Well, let's move on to the next wheel. I would like for you, the next wheel is about support. And these are some of the barriers to support. And I'm guessing that we have many people in this room who give a lot of support. And those of us who are givers sometimes don't ask for what we need in our relationships. And our support network is like a garden that needs to be nurtured. Sometimes we need to plant new seeds. Sometimes we need to nurture our relationships. Sometimes we need to make new friendships, or sometimes we need to weed out certain relationships, toxic relationships. So this is a support network wheel. So I'd like you to pull that out. And each spoke of this wheel is a different aspect of support in your life. And in the handouts, it explains what I mean by each category. And this wheel is a little different because you can write the names of the people who provide you with that type of support. So it might be who gives you emotional support, who are the people who you talk to about how you're really feeling, and they're there for you. Logistical support is like who helps you with your acts of daily living. That might be your roommate, your partner. It might be a service that you have in some way, a dog walker or a child care provider or something like that. And I'd like you to go around and then rate how supported you're feeling in each area. I had an interesting thing happen last week where a gentleman put himself in every category and nobody else. And I thought he kind of missed the point of the exercise. All right, if we could come back to the main group, please. When I give this presentation as a webinar, I usually launch a poll and ask people which kind of support do they most need. And most people have been saying emotional support, like it's significant. That's the highest by far that people are feeling that they really need now. So the purpose of this exercise is for you to identify areas where maybe you need more support and identify, are you accessing the support that you have? Are you asking the people in your life for what you need? What is keeping you from asking for support? Looking at this barriers to support. Are you not asking for the help that you need and deserve? I once was giving a presentation on a topic that I had never given a presentation on that topic before. And I procrastinated until the night before, and I was really overwhelmed. I only had a couple hours to work on it. And I decided to practice what I preach, and I emailed 3 counselors who I thought knew something about the topic. And within 30 minutes, all 3 of them shared with me a PowerPoint presentation on the topic and welcomed me to use their material. It saved me hours of work. And I just think, how many times do we not ask for help? And when we ask for help, it gives other people the joy of being of service. I think sometimes we fear we're going to be an imposition, and sometimes we need to be direct. We need to tell our friends, hey, I'm feeling down. I just need you to check in with me once a day. Send me a text, give me a call. I need us to get together at least once a month. Whatever it is that you need, learning how to ask for it. So I'd love to hear, Jessica has the microphone, if anyone is willing to share what they noticed about doing this exercise. Thank you very much.
I just realized by doing this, and I'm Mental Health America, I should be maybe better, but my support wheel is very low, but I'm in the stage of my life where I have transitioned into being that pillar of support for my family and friends and stuff. And then with COVID, the different changes, I will say that one of the areas that I've had the opportunity, because of being a man of faith, is the spirituality part of that, flipping on that YouTube channel and listening to self-affirmations and stuff like that. But I found that very interesting that I was so low, and it was because what you said, just not being willing to ask.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's amazing. And the research does show that spiritual support is huge. And for some people, that's religion, and for many people, it's not. It might be connecting with nature, it might be meditation or yoga. Yes, there was someone else there that wanted to share.
It just made me really grateful for the names that I see appear in different spaces on my wheel. There's a couple reoccurring names that, until I wrote it down, I didn't really realize how grateful I was to have those supports in my life.
That's so beautiful. And I wonder what it would be like if we each thanked the people on our wheel and said, hey, I just did this exercise and your name came up on 5 spots. We have somebody else here.
I put my husband down in most categories, so now I think we might need marriage counseling based on what you said. Makes me a little nervous. But I do have other friends, so.
Yeah, and that's a good time to check in. I mean, maybe your husband's your primary support, but to check in and say, gosh, I realized you provide me with a lot of support. What's that like for you? Are you feeling supported by me in our relationship? Something to explore. Anybody else want to share something? Once when I gave this talk, I think it was in Nebraska, I had a woman share that she had lost 2 sisters that year who were her 2 best friends. And so her support wheel looked really different than it would have a year before. And she shared that she decided that she still needed that sister support. So she asked 2 of her best friends if she could promote them from best friends to sisters. And she said, I just need you to check in with me every day and send me, funny texts or whatever it is. And she kind of laughed and said, one of them is actually a much better sister than she's ever had before. So even when we experience loss or like when we're in different phases of life, we can nurture our support network, but we need to get better at asking for it, especially if you're taking care of a lot of other people. So we're not going to do this exercise, but this is a professional satisfaction wheel. And this is a tool that you can use in your workplaces if you wanted to give your staff a chance to share how they're feeling about their jobs, how supported they're feeling in each of these areas. How are they feeling about their work-life balance? Do they feel like they have enough professional development opportunities? How are they feeling about their flexibility or their sense of purpose or meaning in their work? How are they feeling about their salary or pay? And this is kind of like doing a 360 review. It can give you a sense of how people are feeling, or you can complete this for yourself and know what you need to negotiate. And these wheel exercises are in my book. I have about 16 of them in my book, and a lot of tools about negotiation and how to create better work-life balance. It is a mental fitness program. So if you feel like you could use some more mental fitness and some more tools, the book definitely has a ton of resources, and it also is helpful for workplace programming. So really what we're talking about is building resilience. The higher our stress is for our mental health, the more self-care we need and the more support we need. So I want you to look at your wheels and think about what are your action items. What are you going to do differently based on today? These are some additional resources if you want to learn more about mental health first aid. The American Psychiatric Association also has a mental health in the workplace program. I mentioned some of the videos that I encourage you to check out. This one at the bottom is about a personal story. This man shares about his suicidal ideation and how someone helped him. If you're going to watch one video, it's that top one that's Sarah's story. It's such a great example of having a conversation about mental health in the workplace. There's several great examples there so that you can get the words, so that you can have some of the conversations that we've talked about. Some other good articles for you to look at, and I do encourage you to look at your policies. Look at your drug-free workplace program policy or your substance abuse policy, because again, the research is showing people are using more substances because we're under more stress. Again, my book is available. I'm happy to sign them for you. We accept really any kind of payment, and I'm excited that it's going to appear in Forbes for the third time in a couple weeks, and we're getting a lot of good responses, which I'm happy about because it's really my life's work. So I'm going to ask Jessica to help one more time, and I want to hear from you. What are you going to do differently based on these presentations?